Hello, Essence. This is Jody England, and you are listening to Wild Soul Medicine Radio. So here we are, and really interesting. I'm actually recording this today on my cell phone because right after I picked the topic to talk about healing our mother wounds with a decision to actually disclose information about my own relationship with my mother that I've never actually talked about publicly before, suddenly every computer in my home has stopped working, which is endlessly fascinating. You really have to love the way energy interacts with technology. So as a last-ditch effort, I'm on the cell phone. I'm sitting here in my bedroom with no music, no accoutrements, just really stripped down. And in some ways that feels probably appropriate for this discussion, to be in this vulnerable space of looking at this deep and painful issue that I would say all of us, really nearly all of us, deal with, right? Because our mother-daughter relationships are so complex, and even if you happen to be lucky enough to be in one that's really healthy and you happen to be really close with your mother, we still carry all of the lineage shame and the lineage suffering and grief and lack and projections that have been, a part of our existence. And so today we're going to be deepening in to talk about what's really at the heart of this mother wound issue, and can we really shift it on our own? What happens if your mom is not on the path? What if she's not available for doing the work with you? Then, what can happen? What's possible for your relationship from there? And so we're just going to dive in. As always, I don't have it figured out. I am always both teacher and student of this work, and I continue to just deepen in and see what's true for me, what can be moved next. And so I'm going to begin by I think I'll just share my story about the evolution of my journey with my mother. And then we'll talk more collectively, like what does that mean for us, and what can you do to heal yours, and what can I do to heal mine, and we'll lean into that together. And I want to just name, as we start this topic, there are such potent energies available right now with the full moon in Scorpio over the weekend, and we're just a couple days out of that, and certainly that energetic is still very present. And Scorpio is an energy that has us look at the hidden things, to look at the bones of what's underneath structures that we're engaged in. And the full moon energy is about enlightening those places where there are shadows and darkness, and illuminating them so that we can bring them forward for letting go. And what's intense about Scorpio energy is it's very it can feel a little harsh, right? So sometimes in Scorpio, the energies are like when you let go of something, it can feel really final, like it's over. And so last week when we talked about friendships, I realized that made a lot of sense. And it didn't end for me there. Like, I thought I had one relationship I was letting go of, and since then it's been several more, just in a week's time, several more where pieces that I'd been trying to get a glimpse at, where I'd been trying to understand how they were off or why they were off. And now it's like one after another, they're just illuminating into, that's what that is. And I'm done with it. Not even like, can I work with it or how can I fix it? But like for me, it really has had that feeling of finality. And so, as we bring all of that energy into this week of mothering, right? Mother's Day, motherhood, all of those energies are sort of mixed with it. And so it will likely be bringing that forward in your experience as well. And you may have already attracted some drama with your mother, or you may be preparing for that in your system, or you may be preparing yourself to be with her, given whatever undercurrents or top currents may be actually present in your relationship at this time. And I know it's up for so many of my students now as well. And even those of us who aren't in a lot of communication with our mothers, they're still like the pain of that shows up in all of our relationships because, as with all wounds, one thing is everything. So you can't compartmentalize. I have this relationship with my mother, but I'm just going to not deal with that. And then I'm going to live the rest of my life because it will show up everywhere. It'll show up in your marriage. It'll show up in the mothering of your own children, like so blatantly obvious in those relationships. It will show up in your coaching and in the mentors that you attract and what you make of them and how you hold them and how you do or don't do your own work based on that. There's literally nothing that isn't invaded by this relationship with our mothers. And, part of it is because as mothers, we have this enormous responsibility. And in some ways, I feel like, is that really fair? Is that fair to put all of that on mothers? Because we are the primary relationship. We are the originating source of, incubating and nurturing the soul into beingness here. And then from there, we remain like this primary source of contact. And so when that little being develops an ego and moves away from us, moves into separation, has that first experience of I am other, the closest being typically is our mother, right? And so our mother then receives the brunt of that separation and all of the story that goes around it. And for most of us, there's some element in that story of she didn't see me, she didn't love me the way that I wanted to be loved, she didn't get me, she made me wrong, she whatever, right? And even those of us, so sometimes we think like, well, my mother was really abusive, and so that's justified, right? Like, of course I had a really horrible mother and that's my wound. And I would say unilaterally across the board, whether you had the nicest mother on the planet or whether you had the worst mommy dearest that you could imagine, those same stories pervade. They are part of the experience. And I get curious about why that would be so, why mothers would be in that particular place. And I think there's, probably lots of answers to that. One being just kind of the role of the feminine and how the feminine has had every shame and fault heaped upon it over the years. And also, I feel like it's part of the wound that needed to happen for us to begin waking up now, understanding the other side of that coin, understanding story, understanding healing and loving and nurturing and coming together and individuality versus relationship, like all of those pieces, there's so much medicine in it, So from that space, I just want to talk some about my journey with my own mother. And it's funny, I was tempted when I was thinking before we got on, like what I wanted to share, where I would start my story. Initially, I thought, well, for me, my story starts later because I had a really beautiful childhood and I loved my mother very much. We were very, very close when I was a little girl. And, she was my favorite person on the planet. Like I just adored her. And then it's only been more recently that we've moved into this place of strife. And then when I felt into it deeper, based on the work that I do, I know that can't be true. I know that you don't suddenly have something new show up as a pattern because all of the patterns originate from childhood. And there's this piece in my core wounding, in my moment of ego formation, where my mother was actually, she was not there. She was normally a stay-at-home mom and did everything for us as children. She didn't work when we were kids, and she was really just such a present mom. And her mother had died when my mother was only 14 years old. And she had really had a rough go of it after that, with alcoholism and her father and abuse from the women that he married and stepchildren who were favored and, all of that. So she really, without any role model, decided to make up for all of that and to really be fully, fully present for us. And, as children do, as daughters do with their mothers, I simultaneously loved that and also judged it. I couldn't believe she would give up her life to be with us. Isn't that great? And this is one of the things that I talk to my students about all the time, because everyone wants to do it different than their mothers. And then we end up carrying the energy of the reaction. And so we end up creating, some version of the same shit. Right. So she was there for me. I loved her. She was beautiful. But in my core wounding, I was actually at my grandmother's house and my father was there. And so the two characters were my grandmother and my father, which is super interesting. So in my cognitive mind, it's like my mom hasn't ever been the villain. And so it's been really puzzling, what has occurred over this recent period where, and really, again, so here's my tendency, and you may have this tendency with your mom too, because there's really not anything on a box that I can check to say she's a bad mom. I tend to minimize, right? And I make myself wrong, or I question myself, is this me or is this her? Which, by the way, is exactly what's been happening in all of my friendships. This is part of the Scorpio full moon, right? It's these shadowy places where deeper inquiry is called for, where more full understanding of all the dynamics are at play. So individuation has always been a hard thing for my mom because she carries the wound of having lost her mom. And so she really wants to be tight and close and tight to the point of let's all be the same. And my brother and sister actually live just a few hundred feet away from her and my father. And that means a lot to her. And so the fact that I live an hour and 15 minutes away, I might as well live across the country, right? Because they rarely come down. We see them down here a couple of times a year, maybe 3. And then we go up there a few times a year. And so that's really interesting. So individuation was really hard for her. So when I went to college and I started, I was going to say started sowing my wild oats, but I guess I always kind of was wild, was responsible and class president and a straight A student and all of that. But, dating the worst boy in the school and riding Harleys with no helmet and drinking and staying out. And, so really was rough for her as a Midwestern Christian woman, nurse, homebody, to have this daughter that was so wild. And, so that was really tough for her. And, as I started making choices that she didn't agree with, she really didn't have a place to go with that. And so she basically went out of relationships. So the things she didn't want, right? I don't want separation, so I'm going to be joined at the hip with my daughter. And then when my daughter starts to individuate, I go out of relationship, which was really painful for both of us. So there was a period of that. And then, as I had my children, we came back together and she was beautiful and supportive with all of that. And then, as I started to evolve in my work, I've mentioned a little parts of this on other shows, but as I started to evolve more into my essence, she went more the other direction. So I started, discovering plant medicine, and I started moving my journey forward at a really fast rate and reclaiming the wild parts of myself. And I had been doing energy work for 10 years, but I just really never said that's what I did. And I started claiming fully, my psychic abilities and my soul healing. And she hated it, right? So as I was doing that, she was becoming more and more right-wing, more and more judgmental, more and more fearful of the other. Literally the antithesis of everything that I am, right? So I'm a peace-loving, hippie, energy worker with an open mind. And my mother is a right-wing gun advocate, I would say racist, small-minded, anti-everything that I am. And it's been this really, really interesting navigation for us because we have such a deep relationship. And yet, trying to figure out how do we stay in relationship when we're so different, and how can we love each other and be ourselves, And it's largely been a one-sided conversation because my mom is not really into introspection, right? Like, so she's really sure that what she does and what she knows is right. And it's been maddening. It's been maddening to be able to, so what it's done is it's forced me to really go into doing my own work. So what I have to keep doing is going in and seeing like, okay, where am I a match to what's happening with her? So this is the first piece that I'm going to invite you all into. So the piece is, anytime something is showing up outside of ourselves, then we have to take a look at what in us actually allows that to be so, right? And so I've had some amazing breakthroughs and growth around those very introspections. So one of them was right before my website launched beginning of last year. And I knew that it was going to cause a big deal, right? Because there I am as a sorceress and a alien medicine woman talking about being radically free and, all of that. And so I called her one day to prepare her to just say, FYI, my website's going to be coming out and you're going to hate everything about it. And just so you know, I've never been happier in my life. I've never been more myself, and just out of courtesy to prepare your system, I want to let you know what that is. And also kind of set a boundary to let you know I'm not really interested in like hearing feedback about what you think about it because it's really not for you, And so along the way, like some before that and some after that, she would be sending me these emails saying, Satan has a hold of you and we don't even know who you are. And, we raised you the same as the other kids and we don't know what went wrong with you. And, very like painful things to receive from your mother who you've loved your whole life and who has loved you. And, at this very tender time when I most want to be held and seen and nurtured and loved, here's my own mother basically saying, I hate your essence. I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't like it. So initially when that happened, the work for me to do was to take a look and see what is it that I don't like about my own essence? Where is it that I'm still in fear about putting this out there? And of course, there were a million matches. So, the first piece that I would offer is, we can let our moms off the hook a little bit and go in and do our own work. And there is a plethora of work to be done inside ourselves. So every time she would reflect that to me, I would go in and say like, yeah, actually, I do still have some fear, particularly around those close to me, right? Because this was such a shift from how I'd been showing up here in the Midwest. Like I'd been showing up this way to my clients, but over the phone across the country. And then to actually bring it fully into these people who had known me for years as just a farm girl, who did some things that they didn't even really know about, was scary, right? It was scary because it's like all of the being burned at the stake and am I really safe and can I be me? And so that was one huge piece of excavation that led to. Another piece was, after I had said to her, you're going to really hate my website. And I just ask that you don't really give me feedback about it. You can think whatever you think, but I'm going to create some space for myself from your projections. There were continued projections, right? So then I would get more emails and I would get, Bible verses and devotionals from her church about, the path that I needed to take. And the funny thing was, it was always like, I'd be so happy and so in essence and like finally not working a ton, which I had done my whole life. And then she would send me an email saying, you need to quit striving and you're trying to please all of these people. And it was like, it was such a slap in the face of like, she doesn't see me at all. She doesn't see, when she's telling me that like Satan is controlling me and that I'm, this horrible force for evil in the world. I would send her the event video from the graduation of Evolution U and these beautiful women who had been healed at the soul level. And it was like hugs and love and light and beauty. And she couldn't see it. She couldn't see it. She couldn't validate it. And it forced me to go in and validate it for myself, right? And it was because it was so obvious that it wasn't me and that she is not me, right? And so there's that piece number two, where as daughters, there comes a point where we have to decide to grow ourselves up. We have to decide that we are no longer the 5-year-old little girl that needs our mommy to say we're okay. But that part of our individuation, the completion of that ego formation process, is arriving back at the place of I am. Right? And then on the, before you get to that, there's all of this, I am good, I am enough, I am seen, I see myself. And then beyond that is I am, period. And so my question for you, or the invitation into inquiry, is to look into how can you grow yourself up? And there's a really respectful, beautiful way that we can do this without reaction. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be she was wrong, or I'm growing myself up because she can't grow me up, or she didn't grow me up right. It's letting go of all of that and stepping fully into your own womanhood, that I am not my mother. I'm not her. She's on her own path and I'm on my own path, right? And so that was a huge part of my journey, is that piece of growing myself up. And then the third piece of really big breakthrough for me had to do with my mom is a twin, and her twin brother is married to a magnificent woman, my Aunt Sue, who is probably listening. Hello, my love. And she's always just been such a support in my life, and she's always been a watcher, right? So thank God for the women in our lives who can hold us when we aren't held by who we think we ought to be held by, right? Because none of us are getting this right all the time. And so it really does take a village to raise a woman, is what I say. And so, my aunt was giving me some beautiful modeling around how to be loved and receive love, and to actually be seen by her. And that felt beautiful. And then I started to feel a lot of grief that my mom couldn't be that for me, that she would never be that for me. And I would have energy readings around it. I would try to see what else could happen to have us get back into relationship or meet in the middle, or, and time after time, people were telling me she's just not going to get it this lifetime. It's not her path. It's not what this medicine is, which is what I've said about soulmates so many times. Soulmates are not necessarily people who walk with you in love and grace. They may be that. And they may also just be tons and tons of medicine, So it's very possible that my mom and I's soul contract has been for her to be this radical stand in opposition to my essence, so that I can deepen radically into my own essence, right? Without any attachments, without any reflections, without any sellout. And it's more like the more she reflects the polar opposite to me, the more I deepen into what is actually true for me. So consider that, right? That could be a possibility for you. And then, as far as like working the places you're still a match, I actually had a huge breakthrough around noticing this giant story I had around the fact that my mother has never seen me. She's never seen me as enough. She's never, all the straight A's, all the accolades, all the successes, no matter how much money I make, how wealthy I am, how happy I am, how successful my children are. She's always got a criticism of it because it's not like her other children, And so, and in my grief, I went into this deep inquiry to look at how am I a match to not being seen by her, right? There must be something in me that is happier being right about the fact that she doesn't see me than being actually available to be seen by her, right? And this is a painful place to look because it's a lot easier to be righteous. It really, really is. It is a lot easier to not look at how you are contributing. And what I would say is one of the ways to make it easier to look inward is if you can let go of the judgment, right? So if you can expand your capacity to just be with in compassion, there's some reason that I made this defense mechanism of not being seen. And that's because because in my core wound, I actually wasn't seen by her. And then in my system, I developed some mechanisms to say, I don't need to be seen by her to be okay. Right? And then when I wanted to switch that off, I forgot that I had even built it. So, I actually went in and did some deep energy work around moving those things. And you can do this energy work on yourself. You can simply imagine going in and visiting your inner little girl and say, why did we decide it wasn't safe for us to be seen by our mom? Is that still true? Does it still make sense? Is it safe now to be seen by her? And it was actually magical for me to own the fact of how much I had been not letting her see, right? So I would put out my website and basically tell her, here's the facade of it, and I'm not going to explain to you what it is, and I'm not going to tell you about it, and then if it scares you or you hate it, that's your problem, right? Instead of being in just like an open dialogue about what it was. And so I did the energy clearing. I wrote her a letter that, basically just said, here's what I want to say to you that I've been avoiding. And it was some boundary. It was some love. It was some, here's my intention and my desire for our relationship, that we can be close and that you can be open to what I'm saying, even if you disagree, and that I can be open to you. And so it took a while. And after a few months, we ended up actually getting together and having a 3-hour conversation where I basically caught her up on my life. What I'd been doing in the 10 years since she stopped being really engaged in my life, and what my journey had been like, and what my spirituality was like. And, because of course for her, if I'm not going to the First Baptist Church every single week, then I must be a sinner possessed by Satan. And, I got to tell her that I work with angels every single day, and that, I'm a champion of the divine, and that's where all of this healing and this soul work comes from. And, and what was so beautiful about it is, so this is the great part of the story, it would be lovely to say she heard it, she saw me, we hugged, we love each other, we're in relationship. And actually, it was a very tearful, intimate, soulful conversation from both parts. And we neither one moved our stance, right? So I'm still me and she's still her, and she still highly disapproves of who and what I am and what I stand for. To my knowledge, I don't think she listens to my radio show ever, but if she does, Mom, I love you. I really, really do. And every week is a process, right? So especially at the beginning, it was every week as I was going to show up and tell my truth, I would have this thought, like, what if she listens? What if she listens? And then what will she think of it? And then, and so for me, that was kind of a construct. So she became this projector of how I keep myself small in the world. Like, I can only do what my mom will approve of. And that's a tiny sliver of what's possible, especially given her projector screen of the world. And so, as we play with this dynamic of seeing what's true, it feels like, there's so much invitation for us finding compassion in the way our lineages flip-flop these stories, right? So, her mom was wild and died early. And then she didn't want to be that. So she became super conservative and very present. And then she, creates a daughter who's wild, and living on the edge, which terrifies her, which is also why she's constantly trying to shut me down. And, just noticing, right, that we're all in reaction to each other. And, so many times when I work with women, what we're looking at are things like suffering, where our mothers were subordinate to the man, or they worked so much that they couldn't actually be present. And so there was all this burden energy of, the child or the daughter being one more thing, one more problem. And then we grow up and we pass that same energy on to our daughters, and I just feel like now is the time for us to start, start leaning into all of that. Like, how do we shift that? And so the first step on every shift is ourselves, to keep going in and doing the work on ourselves. All of those months and months of activation and trigger and reaction that were coming forward for me, I went in, I sat on my cushion, I looked at it, I moved it, I got outside help, I went in dialogue, I took the difficult actions. And that's just where it's at, my darlings. I wish I could say it's easier. I wish I could say, all you do is X, Y, Z and it's handled. But it really is, like I say with everything, it's not about having a beautiful relationship with your mother. It's about who you become on the way to the beautiful relationship with your mother. It's using all of the medicine that you have there in order to become fully who you are. And of course, when we do that, that is how we end up in a beautiful relationship with our mother, or more importantly, a beautiful relationship with ourselves. You know, if it's not in the cards for you this lifetime for you to have your mother be that for you, you know, it can work equally well. I adore my relationship with my aunt. As I've healed these wounds with my own mother, I've started attracting mentors who are filling that role for me. You know, wise women who I'm now available to be counseled by, where before that, I was very closed to any of that because it all felt like my grandmother or my mother, you know, and so I felt like I had to do everything on my own. That was great medicine for a while. And then when I healed all of those wounds, it was like, now some wisdom. Yes. Some holding. Yes. Some love. Yes. I'm willing to allow that in my space. So I want to return to, so we do our inner work, right? And then let's take a more meta view. So outside of the inner work, there's understanding this cosmic joke, this cosmic relationship of the mother being the primal wound for the ego formation, right? And one of the things that happens is, I do this core event work, right? And core events are the moment your ego forms. And it usually happens around the age of 5 or 6. And so every single mother that I have ever had as a client, when we begin this conversation about discovering her core wound, one of the first things she goes to is trying to figure out if she is the core wound of her own child. If they're past the age of 5 or 6, or if they're under 5 or 6, she immediately goes to, how can I prevent being the core wound for my child, right? So this is just so beautiful, right? We love our children. We would do anything for them. We would die for them. And yet, the giant question, like, how can we keep them from this pain? How can we not engage in this pain? And what I always tell them is there's actually no way you can do that because it's inevitable. Your child will have an ego formation. That's how it works. That is the moment of forgetting. That's when we lose connection with our essence and we become human. You know, we fall into this human experience. And so if you were trying to protect your child from that, if you were committed that you will not be part of it, that if it's going to happen, it's going to be someone else who's the villain, you would end up being that in the core wound, right? It would be like, my mother, she never let me do anything. She totally tried to shelter me from anything. And like, that would be the wound. Do you know what I mean? And so usually when I say that to women, it's like somewhat of a relief and also really shitty. Really shitty to think that, these children who we have loved and who we would literally tear our own hearts out for are going to create a story where we are the villain and there's nothing we can do about it. And so, I want to share a couple of those stories because I always feel like there's insight. It's part of this, like, not growing ourselves up, So if your mom is still alive, there's a part of you that still feels like the daughter, like the little girl daughter. And I know the same is true for me. Like, even as I've had children, my daughter's 11 now, my son is 12. There's a part of me that still feels like I'm parenting them as a child, like, I can't believe nobody's come yet to show up and say, what are you doing with these kids? Should you really be in charge? And so I've watched this happen, and so I feel like as you start to see in your children, this is this beautiful mirror, as you start to see what's happening in your children, it gives you so much insight into what was happening with your parents that you couldn't really see or react to because you had such a microcosmic view of what it's like to be a daughter, As a kid, you just it's so self-centered, so you can't even, I remember when I was a teenager and I would come home drunk and late as a teenager, my daughter or my mom would, it's funny, my mom would be laying on the couch waiting for me. And I would be so mad at her because I was like, I felt like she was doing that to me. Like that she was waiting up for me to like cramp my style or make it difficult for me. I had no belief that she actually cared. Which is so bizarre. Like, of course, she was worried sick about me. She knew what kind of daughter she had, right? And she was worried sick and did not land for me at all till I had children. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I really put her through it. I really did. And so there were so many stories, but as my children have been growing up, there was one where, so of course, my children are raised in love and open-mindedness, and they have anything a child could want for, and we're out in the world in beautiful, loving ways, and there's very little turmoil in our home. It's a pretty cushy life for most humans. And yet, my son clearly has a core wound that involves me. Women particularly, and definitely me. And he's constantly making stories up that I don't love him, or that I'm not there for him. And there was this one really perfect example. There's this Mexican restaurant that we love to go to, and I think he was maybe 7 or 8, maybe 7. And we went there for his dinner. It was his favorite place. And I was sitting beside him, and there's this part where they come out and put the sombrero on, and they sing the song, and then they take a picture, and they put the picture up on the bulletin board, and they leave it there, right, for a year. So in the picture, I'm leaning away from him, clapping and smiling, right? Smiling, laughing. And, because I was trying to get out of the picture. And as they hung that picture up, the whole year, every time we would go there, he would get so triggered, and he would say, "I can't believe you were making fun of me. I cannot believe that you were making fun of me. That is so mean," right? And, even then I was teaching about everything's a story and about core wounds, and, and it was such a perfect snapshot of sometimes it doesn't matter what you do. Sometimes they're just going to have the story they have, and you agreed to show up and be the projection screen of that. I am that for my clients all the time. Every one of my students who comes into my group, no matter how much I say, be in yourself and be in your own story, I always end up becoming the mother, right? The mother figure, the mother projection, the woman who didn't give them whatever it is they need. And I'm willing to play that role, right? Because sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need to be able to try on what's us and what's them in order to see what's true, And there was another example with my daughter. So I used to do this to my mother. As I mentioned, she was a stay-at-home mom nearly the whole time I was growing up. And then I think as we got into later grade school, she worked 1 day a week at a doctor's office. And so on Wednesdays, I would get off the bus and she would not be at home. And I would give her no end of grief about, "I can't believe that you would not be here when I would get off the bus," right? And she used to say all through my life, "I hope when you grow up, you can have a daughter who gives you the same crap you gave me because I was so there for you, blah, blah, blah." And of course, I have that daughter, right? She's a great mother just like I am. And so nothing is enough for her. And even though I work at home only 3 days a week, and I'm usually done by 3:30 or 4 at the latest, if you would ask her, her story is that I'm on the phone all the time and that I'm not there for her. There's nothing I can do about that, except for, right? So here's the thing, and here is the crucial thing that I tell all of the mothers when they ask me that question about what can we do about these core woundings and how can we prevent them. And I say, the best thing that you can do is to teach your children that everything is a story. That everything is a story. And their journey will be about them learning to navigate their way out of all of their stories, right? And so if you just teach your children that one tool, it gives them the ability to move through all of the stuff that they will attract and create on their soul path. And it allows you to have a space of sanity for yourself, right? To know that even your story about their story is all a story, right? So I could definitely fall into what my mom did, so if I'm my mom, I don't want to leave my children. I don't want to be what my mom did. I don't want to be some wild woman who's irresponsible about mothering, and then that story ends up creating a whole story for her children. So the clearest space is to say, I don't have any stories. And we play with that on lots of levels at my house. It is by no means perfect because, they still have to figure it out. They're still going to have wounds. They're still going to get stuck in the illusion. I still get stuck in the illusion, right? And it is in looking at the illusion that my children are in that I can be like, oh my gosh, I have that same thing. So when my daughter says to me, you're never here for me, right? I take that in. I clear in me what is a match to having a daughter that doesn't appreciate me, right? And then you can already hear where that's going to go from there, right? It's going to go up the chain to the lineage. I clear where I believe that about my mother. Do you see? So we don't have to wait for anyone to change. We don't have to wait for our children to appreciate us. We don't have to wait for our mothers to become a different person or to move into the current decade. We can just keep becoming free in ourselves. And literally that is the only healing that you can ever be in control of. But as you do it, you're clearing the space for your daughter. You're clearing the space for your mother to free up. You know, I don't know what that will look like for my mother, but I know that every time I clear, I create the possibility for more peace in her system, whatever that looks like, right? So that's the work we're really doing for each other, is extricating ourselves from our own stories about our own mothers and our own children so that we can shed light on what's true to walk in essence and fullness and love everlasting. Yeah. So, as we prepare to wrap up our session today, what I'd like to invite you into is a healing meditation. A healing meditation on behalf of ourselves and all mothers everywhere. If you just close your eyes and deepen into this space of connection, and part of the lineage pain of the collective is because it's been so unsafe for us to be fully who we are until this moment in time, because it's been so dangerous for us to even sort out our pain or to do anything other than survive. There's been a lot of projection, so it's like, hey, okay, every woman for herself, like I'm going to make my little nook and cranny here. And, if you pull on me too much, or if you step outside the box, or if you do something different than I do, or you get more free than I am, I have to project at you, right? And this still goes on. It's the whole like working moms versus stay-at-home moms debate. It's, wild women versus conservative women. It's Christians versus non-Christians. It's like all of that. And, so if we can just take a moment and become aware of, what felt like a necessity, all of these eons that we've been trading back and forth our pain, through our judgments, through our projections. Just feel it. You can just feel it in the collective. You can feel the density of it. You can feel the pain of it. It's like arrows and war and devastation and wound. It just is really wound. And then you can feel your place in the middle of all of that. Whether you are a shadow walker, right? And so you're tapped into the collective, deep, dark pain of all of that. Or if you're a sunshiny woman who's just avoided it, right? Who's tried to walk the outskirts of it, maybe tending a soul here or there, but really largely avoiding the truth of the whole. Be willing to be with where you stand in all of that. Just as an awareness, just as an opening in our consciousness around it. Yeah. And then try on in your imagination what would happen if we were to stop shooting our arrows back and forth, right? Whether it's between one kind of mom to another, or whether it's between you and your own mother, or you and your own daughter, or you and your grandmother, right? What if you were to stop? If you were to create the ceasefire? And then notice what would happen if just all the women who listen to Wild Soul Medicine Radio were to join you. Notice what begins to happen in our collective as we wake up and we begin to stand for something new. Feel the power of that. Feel how nobody needs to do anything other than be. Nobody needs to own your pain or handle something for you or forgive you or forgive themselves or say they're sorry, right? We can just all stop. Yeah. And so as you bring that vision of what's possible into yourself, start to feel, who would you be if you stopped being what you are? Who would you be if you stopped being what you are or what you have been? If you stopped being the wounded child? If you stopped being the persecuted edgewalker? If you stopped being the misunderstood evolutionary? If you stopped being the rebellious teenager? What if you could let go of all of that reaction so that you could be free? I know it's tempting to hang on. Our egos have every reason to continue the fight. Our egos want somebody to be right and somebody to be wrong. That's how we survive. That's what the ego would have us believe, right? And in reality, the ego is not us. It's just a mechanism we use to navigate the human experience. But we are infinite souls that chose to journey with these women in our lives for the medicine that we wanted to experience. And I invite you into a remembering of that in this moment, of the wholeness of who you are, just pulling back any of those ties that you have put out, those unmet tendrils that are laying at the feet of your mother. And just see if, you can try it on, even if she would pick them up, even if there was a place they could hook into her, notice how that actually wouldn't fill you. Because it's falseness. It's not true that anyone can do anything for you that you can't and shouldn't be doing for yourself, right? Remember, it's inside and then through. When we're full here, we can connect with other people, and we will, but that will be an extension of who we are, an expression of our wholeness, rather than a search for completion. That's the game we're playing. So in this moment, just invite your tendrils back in, find a loving place, maybe even just hook them right back into your own heart. Feel how you are the source of this infinite wellspring of love that can never run out, that can never do it wrong, that can never abandon. It's always right here, but you can only see it if you turn inward. Yeah, and just feel yourself filling up with love and gratitude for your place here at this edge of waking up to something that none of our mothers or grandmothers were able to do before now. But as we do it, in this moment, we heal backwards in time and we heal forwards in time. Our daughters will reap the benefits of what you are sowing right here in this moment on behalf of all of us. And so as we bring our time to a close, I just bow at the feet of each of you who's willing to come in and take the medicine, to fill yourself up, to let go of your story, as compelling as it may be, who chooses the path to freedom rather than the path of righteousness. Happy Mother's Day in advance to each and every one of you. Happy Mother's Day to my own mother. Thank you for being my medicine. I adore you. Until next time, my loves. Bye for now.